The major reason, and still one of the major reasons why I do not believe in the one God, specifically the God of Islam, is the problem of hell. I simply think that the idea of creation, free will, afterlife, and hell is completely incoherent and inconsistent with our understanding of morality, and even with Islam's own understanding of morality, for example, or with God's understanding of morality, if you want to have it so. So the idea is that there was one God at the very beginning before he created anything. Then he did create a world, a universe, and beings within this universe. Then he did give certain beings or certain creatures within this universe free will, and he gave them the choice to believe in him or to disbelieve in him after he communicated his message to them. Depending on whether they believe or do not believe, they will go to heaven or hell. Yet Allah, or God, at the very beginning is almighty, all-knowing, and he's the greatest good. And yet, at the very beginning, knowing exactly what we will do with our free will, how we will be, where we will end, he still created millions, billions of humans that are bound to go to hell. The whole idea that free will exists, that he creates free beings, that he judges them and sends some to hell, necessarily concludes that numerous humans will necessarily go to hell. It is inevitable. It is part of the whole plan. I think that this makes the belief in God for me and for many other people impossible, especially in the Islamic God.
Are you saying God punishes people in hell, therefore a good God does not exist? It's a logical argument. Or are you saying I don't like it, so I don't want to believe in this God?
He created me as this flawed being who is incapable to grasp this truth, and he punishes me for what he himself created, while calling himself the most forgiving and the most good. And he contradicts with himself on so many levels.
I mean, I don't agree with everything you said there, if that's your representation of Islam. But that aside, I just want to know, Ridvan, where is the contradiction?
The contradiction is Allah is not the most forgiving. I am more forgiving than Allah in this case.
Why?
Because I would forgive people for much bigger faults, for much bigger crimes, for much bigger ignorances, worse things that they do.
So his forgiveness is not unconditional. He says that God does not forgive for people to associate partners with him, right? So there's a condition there, right? It's not unconditional. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, anything else he can forgive. Even if you want to say you're more forgiving, whether or not that's true, I just don't see, if you're trying to make a logical argument and say there is a contradiction, I don't see a contradiction.
That is fallacious, because that's like me saying, hey, I'm not a thief, but sometimes I like to steal food when I'm hungry, but I'm still not a thief.
No, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's saying God saying he is the most forgiving is contextualized within Islam, right? So forgiveness comes at certain conditions, right? Mm-hmm. And within that context, God is the most forgiving, because forgiving isn't all he is. He is also the most just. You can think it's evil.
You can arbitrarily say that forgiveness comes with conditions, and Allah made those conditions clear, which is why when he does not forgive you for not believing in him, that is not a contradiction, because he made the condition very clear. You could say that. Well,
it's not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary. I gave you the verse. I mean, there's a condition. It's there, so it's not arbitrary. He mentioned it. I'm not making an ad hoc, exception here.
With regards to this concept of being the most forgiving, the idea that you can give a particular example where you think you would forgive where Allah doesn't make you more forgiving, because we can think of this in terms of quantity. So how many things can you forgive compared to how many things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive? So he's an eternal being, and there are countless beings being forgiven for countless acts. Now, if he can forgive them for that, he is objectively more forgiving than you. So he is the most forgiving.
Did I understand that correctly? Are you saying that the fact that Allah is eternal and there are endless things that he can forgive and endless occasions on which he can forgive, the high quantity of forgiveness that Allah can give means that he is necessarily more forgiving than me, because I cannot forgive as many things that Allah can forgive?
Yeah, that's what most forgiving is. Being the most forgiving means that you forgive.
Ridvan. So what Yusuf is saying here, I mean, just even if you can disagree with that, but then you have to accept that if that is the understanding of most forgiving as presented in Islam, which is a possible explanation, then there's no direct inconsistency.
How do you guys define most forgiving? How do you define most forgiving?
Yusuf just gave a perfectly reasonable answer.
Does most forgiving to you just mean somebody who forgives in the most cases, or who has the highest quantity of forgiveness?
He is the
It's not.
greatest
It's not
capacitor of
unconditional.
forgiveness.
So the problem is here, Ridvan, is that you are looking at one attribute of God, right? So he is the most forgiving, but that's contextualized because he's also just, right? He has wrath. He punishes, right? So you can have multiple attributes that maybe on the face of it sound contradictory, but once you contextualize it and be a bit charitable towards the text, there is a coherent picture. So
Okay, let me ask you a question, Abdul.
Yeah.
If I say to you, I am the most merciful, the most forgiving guy out there, but if you call me names, then I will come and shoot you.
yeah, it
I
depends
mean,
on, it
it's
depends
clear,
on-
but I'm also the most forgiving, the most merciful, the most kind, and the most just person out here.
No. I wouldn't think you're based on this contextualized human experience we have. No, I do not think, because I know what we
How does
mean.
that make the question? How does that change the?
Because okay, so right now, you are saying that God, being the most forgiving, should rule out the possibility of him justly, according to the Islamic position, punish people in hell. That's not a contradiction. It might be something that you don't like, and I
No,
think
it's not.
it's not, right? So, but
A
it is so.
contradiction is A and not A.
Okay,
Exactly.
I said it is incoherent and contradictory on many
Yeah.
levels. It is incoherent because, for example, God is supposedly creating humans and putting them through a test, and then judging them based on the results of this test, and punishing them, burning them forever, or even rewarding them forever. I think even the reward part is incoherent and unjust, if you want to have it so. Allah is not really judging people for something that they have done wrong and which could have not been prevented by himself, or which they are really powerful enough to prevent. He punishes them for something that he himself in the very beginning caused.
Yeah, but it seems to me, Ridvan, sorry, because right now, in order for you to make a logical argument, you can't sneak in your. I'm not saying sneak in a bad way. You can't sneak in your views on metaethics, what morality is, and what it means to be good and bad. You can't sneak that in without us addressing it. So right now, if you're making an argument purely based on a logical incoherence, you have to say that being the most forgiving necessitates that God does not punish people in hell. God punishes people in hell, therefore God is not the most forgiving. You have to make that, but we will dispute premise 1 very clearly. Are you not allowing us to dispute premise 1?
No, you can't do that. I just think, I mean, even on that point, you have a big misrepresentation of what most forgiving would mean or how it would be defined. Let's not even come to the fact that Allah is eternal, almighty. His lifetime exceeds my lifetime by a mathematically impossible number, which is why my forgiveness is incomparable to his forgiveness necessarily.
But you're a subjectivist, aren't you? Aren't you a subjectivist?
It doesn't matter. I'm not saying it's morally wrong. It doesn't matter. I'm saying it is incoherent.
Forgiving is a moral judgment. Someone being forgiving, that's a moral judgment. Isn't what is most forgiving to you a subjective view that's not necessarily representative of an objective reality and the way things ought to be?
I'm not really a subjectivist in that sense. I don't think that morals are true or false in any sense, that they are simply representations of our emotions about certain things for which we make rules based on a need to survive. I don't think that they are subjectively or objectively true or false. But aside from that, forgiveness.
So you're an emotivist. You're an emotivist in the sense that you think that all moral propositions are reducible to emotional, emotional stances or emotional positions. It's inconsistent for you to say that there couldn't be an opposing emotional position on what it means to be the most forgiving or the most good.
But you can't judge us by my worldview or what you think my worldview would be or what you think what my morals would be. Based on Islam's own understanding, even let's forget about Islam. Forgiveness is a concept that we humans have established. We establish certain rules based on what hurts us, harms us, or what benefits us and pleases us. Somebody who forgives is somebody who looks past the mistakes that others have made and tries to, reconcile the bad with the good and tries to make peace and tries to be merciful with that person. Somebody who looks past it and says, hey, you know what? Despite everything you have done, I forgive you. That person would be, in a regular society, be considered the most forgiving person, for example. If we now look at God, on the other hand, God, or Allah in this case, is a being, an eternal being, who creates people and punishes them simply for not believing in him, simply for not believing in, for nothing else, despite the fact that in the very beginning, despite the fact that in the very beginning he created them in such a way that they would not believe in him. That is not most forgiving by any definition.
Ridwan, there's one thing you need to understand. The general position within the Islamic theology on this issue is that no people are punished unless a messenger has been sent to them. So people are not just simply punished because they didn't believe. So we just got to be really careful in terms of that. If you're saying that the standards that the Quran places on this is a logical contradiction, then therefore that discounts Islam. That means that you have a burden of proof to demonstrate that the only possible way to read a particular verse that talks about forgiveness or whatever it is that you're trying to point out is one particular way which contradicts another particular way.
Let's not make a mistake in defining who goes to hell in Islam according to the Islamic belief. Somebody who knows about the faith and who rejects it and doesn't believe in it goes to hell according to the Islamic belief. So I, by the opinion of, I think, everybody who sits here and the Muslim population in general and Islamic scholars in general, will definitely go to hell by the scriptural evidence.
If you die in the state you're in. So we can't say that. There's a lot of examples where people were the biggest enemies of Islam. They took Shahada later on, and you wouldn't even have expected it. So we can't even say that about you now. We can say that if you were to die in that state, then you would be guaranteed hellfire.
It's not even our place to make that judgment. The judgment of who goes to hell is with God alone. Yeah, we might turn around and say this person's a disbeliever, this person's a Muslim, but actually the key judgment is for God alone.
You believe, or the idea is that Allah is all-knowing, almighty, and the most merciful and the greatest good, right?
Yes.
And you believe that Allah created all of us.
Yes.
You believe that Allah gave us free will.
Yes.
You believe that Allah knew exactly what we would do with our free will.
Yes.
And despite that, he created us at the very beginning, right?
Yes.
Then he set up a hell and a heaven, which he built, and gave us the mission to believe in him. And if we reject his belief, then it is our fault, right?
Yes.
And that we, disbelievers, will therefore go to hell, right?
Yeah. Do you agree that it's free? By your free choice, you are seeing the truth and arrogantly rejecting it.
The condition here is not that I clearly know that Allah is real and that Islam is true, and then I reject Islam and therefore go to hell. That's not the point, right? The point we're making is that I'm aware of the Islamic religion, of the Islamic text, but I reject it.
No. The Islamic position is that the kufr is when you see the truth and reject it and cover it. That's literally what kufr means.
Do we agree that if I, at the moment of death, reject Allah and do not believe in his existence, do not believe in Islam, I will, by definition, by the Islamic teachings, go to hell?
Yeah, but not by my judgment of the apparent that this guy doesn't believe. Yeah,
doesn't matter. If I myself, with the position that I right now have, die, then I will, by the Islamic teachings, the fundamental Islamic teachings, go to hell. That is the idea.
Yes, if you die as a disbeliever and you are truly a disbeliever in the eyes of God, then yes, you will go to hell. There's
and before Allah created me and put me on this earth, long before he created the world, he knew exactly that if he gives me free will and creates this person that I am today, I will eventually use my free will in such a way that I will not be convinced by him. I will arrogantly disbelieve in him, which is why I will be eternally punished. And that just like me, millions, maybe billions of other people will also go to hell despite him having given them this free will.
Yes, but
that is incoherent. I think that is.
It's not incoherent. Maybe you don't like it. So I see the power in the argument. So I freely admit that the argument from evil, whatever the problem of evil in some of its forms, is the most challenging position to theism, right? Are you saying there is an incoherence, therefore it is false? Or are you saying it is immoral, therefore it's false? If you're saying it is immoral, therefore it's false, you have to appeal to some kind of moral realism, some objective standard to say that if it does not match up with this standard, it is false. If you're saying there is an inconsistency within the Islamic tradition, present the contradiction. I haven't seen it yet. No, so you just don't like it.
I'm saying it is incoherent because God himself creates people that he puts into hell for the way that he himself created them and calls this a test, which is not a a test. It is simply something that
Why?
he himself
Freely, but
designed.
you
designed from the
granted it's
beginning to the
free.
end. Even if we wanted to go into the details of what free actually means, we could go into. We have newly emerging emerging ideas of how much people actually have free will, because we are very much neurologically, environmentally, and so on conditioned on how we act in life, which will also decide.
But you grant for the argument. Grant for the sake of the argument that they are truly free. If you want to get into a discussion,
I don't think they're
will,
truly free.
You can, for the sake of the argument, unless you want to get into a debate about free will. I'm saying for the sake of the internal critique you're doing on Islam, in the Islamic positions, these creatures are truly free. Therefore,
I don't think we could actually get anywhere with that, because we would have to consider the reality of how humans actually function, where we see that humans are not free.
But that's not an internal critique anymore. That's not. So right now we're going to get into a discussion about what free will is, and you're not doing an internal critique on what the Islamic position says and pointing out to contradictory propositions.
Within the Islamic narrative, it's explicitly stated numerous times that the human is created responsible. And Allah even says in the Quran, it's not me who wrongs you, but you wrong yourself. You can't point to the Quran and say that this is incoherent when the Quran's message is quite clear, that the beings being created are making choices of their own accord, and that they are responsible for these choices and then punished for them.
Just because the Quran says it is your responsibility, this is why I'm punishing you, that doesn't mean that logically seen it is actually their fault, which is why it's punishing. It doesn't mean that the assertion that the Quran makes is necessarily correct. It just means that the Quran is making a certain assertion. I could make assertions here about how everything that I have ever said is true because I know that it is true. And you just need to trust me in that. That doesn't mean that that you have to trust me.
But this isn't about a level of trust. This is about, you're saying the Quran is making a contradictory claim. And a contradiction is that it makes the claim A and not A simultaneously. The negation of A. It hasn't made the negation of A. It's pushing forward the claim that you are a responsible being.
I think I already explained how it is incoherent, because in this scenario, Allah is basically punishing people while claiming that he's punishing people for their own faults. He's actually punishing them for the way he created them, knowing exactly that this is what their nature in which he created them, what they would do, what would happen to them eventually. Let me ask you.
And that's unjust?
You're packaging it as if it's a logical contradiction. It's sounding
I'm saying it is incoherent. Look, it is incoherent.
I'm saying that you said that. It sounds more like a moral claim.
It is not.
Then you need to show. Then you need to show what's the logical contradiction. You haven't shown that.
Allah, at the very beginning, creates human beings in such a way that they will be conditioned to misuse their free will, which Allah gave to them in such a way that they will be eternally punished. And yet, at the very beginning, he decides to go ahead with that, decides to create them, and decides to send them to hell.
I respect your right to believe that it's a cop-out, but for me, a cop-out would be that you present a problem and I brush the problem aside and avoid it. What I did do is I took your idea very seriously, and I actually asked you questions to clarify the specific argument you're trying to make. You said you're trying to make an internal critique and point out an incoherence. I'm not sure you're aware what an incoherence is, but in order to do that, you need to present an actual deductive form argument, or even if you're not going to present it in a deductive form, you have to point out two positions that are inconsistent or contradictory. Like proposition A and proposition B imply A and not A. That's a contradiction.